Welcome to the Rob Liefeld Show featuring Robservations. I bring over 40 years experience in comic books and entertainment across 5 decades. I offer insights and opinions on the business and the art of comic books and pop culture. If it's happening in games, in movies, in streaming, or comic books, we're covering it right here on the Robservation Show. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Rob Liefeld Show, featuring Robservations. I am your host, Rob Liefeld. I have been making the comic books for 40 years, writing, drawing, inking, publishing, across 5 decades, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and the 2020s. If you know me, you know comic books are my absolute passion. I love being part of the game. I love being in the game. Got a bunch of books that are coming out. I'll tell you about those comic books at the end of the show. But we are coming to you this morning at the top of the show, at the top of the morning, to discuss the passing of a tremendous figure in the comic book world, and what's going to offset the sadness that I feel over this absolute titan's passing is the fact that I am going to sit here and celebrate him, his impact, and his work. Jim Shooter was, for my lifetime, he is and has been the most consequential, the most impactful, and the most influential editor-in-chief Marvel Comics has had in the last 50 years, easily since Stan Lee. And that's saying something. There have been some talented guys in the position, but none of them combine Jim Shooter's talent, Jim Shooter's management expertise, and I'm going to get into each of these, and his acumen, his instincts. He made huge changes that benefited my generation and the generation after. Just a seminal figure who understood that comic books were changing. He understood where they were coming out of in the late 70s when he became the editor-in-chief, and he turned the Marvel machine in the direction that it would benefit creators. And when you have happy, engaged creators, then you are going to have incredible work. And that is what Marvel Comics produced during this period that I loved Marvel the very most. And you can go, well, Rob, and I've had people say this to me, and hey, Rob, you only like that period because you were a kid. Here's where that doesn't work. That's like saying I like The Godfather because I saw the movie with my parents, a Sunday night movie broadcast with commercials. It's like saying that I liked that movie because I saw it when I was 7 or 8, completely denying that it is an award-winning, acclaimed work, a film that many believe is one of, if not the greatest movies ever made. The fact that I saw it and consumed it at 7 or 8 years old does not negate that. Frank Miller's work on Daredevil, Walt Simonson's run on Thor, John Byrne's entire Marvel output up until 1986, these are celebrated works. I was lucky to have been around. Jaws is not just great because I saw it when I was a kid. I rewatched Jaws the other day and I could not believe the craft that Steven Spielberg. I watch it once a year, and every year I cannot believe the craft, the way that they had to make new cameras, adjust cameras, the way cameras were positioned to film on the water, all of the different hurdles and the problem solving that Steven Spielberg had to do to enact his vision, which is still thrilling. My wife jump scared, like leapt in the couch twice, and we watched it from 3 to 5 on a summer afternoon. This is called a master of the craft, no matter when it came out. Jim Shooter unlocked formidable talents. It is for me one of, if not the greatest aspects of his reign as Marvel editor-in-chief. He oversaw so many different talents that he unlocked. By unlocked, I meant, he said, and he talks about it in some of these interviews that I'm going to share with you, There's a Comics Journal interview where he talks about that Frank Miller's a kid. He's a kid, but he saw the spark. He actually says he saw a sustainable spark in Frank Miller. And we're going to get deeper into Daredevil and the role that Jim Shooter played in unlocking Frank, which has given us a run on Daredevil that was the most, nothing has been more transformative in my lifetime than what Frank did for Daredevil, and how everyone has been running to catch up ever since. He did the same thing with Batman at DC, but this isn't about DC. This is about Jim Shooter. And we've got to start at the beginning with Jim Shooter when we're talking about Jim Shooter. His biggest impact did come from his tenure at Marvel Comics and all of the comic books that he affected with all of his decision making. But as I said to you, he had tremendous talent. This guy is a top flight writer and wrote books, comics that resonate with me to today. And I'm in my 50s, okay? They resonate with me to this day. He started out mailing stories into DC Comics as a teenager, 13 years old. He got his first story sold, and from 14 on, he was writing Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. He was comic books' first wonderkind. He was the first, breakout Wonder Boy. And he did this for years. He wasn't just a one-hit wonder. He wasn't just somebody who just kind of had a couple of stories published. He became a regular writer for DC Comics. As I stated earlier, one of the reasons that it is so easy to come on here today and talk about Jim Shooter, someone who I absolutely adore, and was able to express to him how much I adored him. That's the best part. I was actually able to, physically break bread with him, tell him how special I thought he was. The reason it's so simple to come here the day after his passing, which when it was announced, it was an immediate ripple effect. And because he was, as I said, a consequential, like the definition of consequential figure. And because he made so many important decisions and elevated the game in the way that he did. And you're going to talk, and we'll give we'll just give the smallest amount of volume to the people who decided, well, he's dead, let's take shots at him. Such poor taste. So tacky. You're tacky. If you said something shitty about him upon learning that he died, you're just a shitty person. You're just a tacky guy. I don't care how much he deeply wounded you. He's dead and you're not, okay? Just basic, rules of humanity, right? The reason it's so easy to celebrate this, I have been celebrating him on the show, the Robservations podcast, for the last 5 years. I have numerous episodes, and many of you were able to tell me over the last 24 hours that some of the your encounters with Jim Shooter were predicated on you learning about him from my podcast, and that is why they exist. Again, we don't do any advertising for this show. I do this show because I love it, and I love to share my passion of comic books and comic book history. And I get excited about Jim Shooter. And now that he is gone, and I am so sad that he is gone, but I'm going to sit here, and based on a bunch of the stuff I read, I'm just going to praise Jim for as long as I can go this morning. And I'm going to read directly from the text from my Marvel Management episode 5 years ago that I did on my Robservations podcast. I talked about how Jim Shooter created the villain Parasite while writing Superman as a teenager. Jim was literally the guy that you would hear in interviews, in magazines, read about in comic book fanzines, like the kid who broke in as a teenager. It is a fantastic story, especially given that such accomplished, legendary, veteran talent, such as Kurt Swan, who was like the Superman artist for a couple of generations, was drawing his stories. These veterans were handed stories by a 14-year-old. I said, imagine being Jim Shooter, 14 years old, and industry veterans are drawing the stories that you are writing out on your typewritten paper, because Jim told me he wrote it out on lined paper. 14 years old, writing Superman, writing the Legion of Superheroes. And DC is so deeply embedded in this relationship with him that when I get into comics, and I've talked to you guys about 1974, 1975, I'm 7, I'm 8, I'm getting into comics, I'm buying Marvel, I'm buying DC. Some of my favorites. You're gonna see me reach into a couple of boxes and a couple of stacks because what I did, and it was the easiest I've ever had to prepare for an episode. Some episodes take a lot longer, but because of my passion for Jim and my passion for his work and the runs that would not exist but for his involvement, Jim was writing Legion of Superheroes in 1975. This is one of my favorites. I'm going to tell you right now. I bought this at the 7-Eleven on the corner of Magnolia and Broadway. That's where I lived at the time. When I had extra, change, as I've said, digging into the couches, knowing that my dad had change that would pour out into the seat, go into the driver's seat of our Buick, and digging those out. I would skateboard up to the corner market, and these are the comics that I would buy. Now this issue of Superboy and Legion cost me a quarter. This is a quarter. Number 212, okay? Drawn by Mike Grell, right here, 1975. I didn't track, I don't know how old Jim is at the time, but it's right here, right up there. Art by Mike Grell, story by Jim Shooter. Jim Shooter never looked back. Once they hired him, he stayed hired into his late teens, into his early 20s. This is a great story about a bunch of characters with duplicate powers. A guy who has magnetic powers to reflect Cosmic Boy's magnetic powers. They have a phantom person. They have a shrinking person. They have all these counters, and they're like, we want these spots. Well, then, and they come in, and because they have the element of surprise on their side, these new characters upend the Legion and really make a successful challenge argument for their challenge. Then there's a rematch, and now our Legionnaires are much better prepared, and they switch off. They switch the assignments. So the magnetic guy thinks he's going up against the magnetic guy, but he's really Chameleon Boy is disguised as this rod, and then he punches him and knocks him out, and that's how it goes. It's all switching off. It's fun. It's brilliantly, beautifully drawn by Mike Grell, who was deep in his Neil Adams bag at the time, and as a kid, I just drank this stuff up. There's actually 2 stories in here. There was always a backup story. Jim also wrote that, again, Mr. Mike Grell on chores. The Legion was such a fun book. It was such an absolutely fun book. But you'll see again where the credits, right there at the bottom, Mike Grell, Jim Shooter. Okay, so Jim Shooter was part of my earliest encounters with comic books, writing these Legion of Superheroes issues. So we're gonna get back into his talent because his story starts as a teenage boy, and it's impactful because of the talent that he brings with it. Imagine your 13, your 14-year-old walking in you right now going, hey, I'm writing comics for DC. I'm writing comics for Marvel. Fill in the blank. I'm writing comics for Image. You'd be like, what? I've always proudly worn that I broke in at 18 years old. It was a personal goal of mine, and when I achieved it, I was so excited. It also revealed to me while I was on vacation recently that I was the only Gen Xer in a group of boomers when we started Image Comics, and I always knew I was the youngest, but I didn't know that it was a generational thing, and it really, a light went on in my head. Well, guess what? 18 is young. 14 is way younger. Way younger. So Jim has always had that as part of his incredible story. I'm a resume guy. I love resumes. I love deep resumes. I love resumes that boast of some surprising success, and of course, none is more impressive, and no resume for me is better than Jim Shooter. What I am gonna hit on right now before we get to what I believe his biggest impact. We're gonna start off. So we've established he's had talent. He's young. He's writing. We're gonna go to his biggest impact. Archie Goodwin hands off the reins as editor-in-chief on January 1st, 1978. This era of Marvel is about to just take off. It's about to shine. The biggest accomplishments of this era at Marvel are helmed by Jim Shooter. Stan Lee, for those of you who aren't aware, had moved out to the West Coast. He was trying to get the Hulk show with Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno made. He was trying to get the CBS movies with Spider-Man made. He was trying to get the Reb Brown Captain America TV movies made. He was out there trying to bring, pre-Feige, trying to set all the stuff up, do the cartoons, get the stuff on a broader level. Jim is now helming Marvel, and I wrote here, Jim Shooter's tenure may be one of the richest of any editor-in-chief because of the talent that he unleashed onto the comic book world. He took their creative limitations away. He removed any obstacles. First and foremost among them is Frank Miller. I'm going to get back to Frank Miller. Pivoting so perfectly from Frank Miller is, and I was delicate to pull this out, a lot of the stuff that I have shown you guys on the show before we went to YouTube was my very, very, very delicate Comics Journal magazines. Now, if you'll notice that there's tape here keeping this together, there is. This does not have a value of a grade to me. This is not a 9.8 product. It is not a. It exists because it is vintage. These are hard to get. I've carried these with me since. So in 1982, when I grabbed this, I am 13 years old. So this is a product of my 13-year-old obsession. This is January 1982, okay? Now, and this has this kick-ass Frank Miller cover. It has a kick-ass Frank Miller interview. I've shared this, guys, with you. So if you're listening, this is the Comics Journal number 70. It's $2.50. It's a hefty issue. It's got the spectacular all-silhouette Daredevil cover, and it says an exclusive interview with Daredevil's Frank Miller. That's all well and good. That's why we bought it, for this interview. And again, as I'm showing it up, you can see I have Scotch tape. Scotch tape. Okay, me and Ron love our Scotch. Okay, I got Scotch tape on the back cover and the front cover to hold it together. It is in this section, in the opening news section, that Jim Shooter lands the biggest plane he'll ever land. This says Marvel announces royalties. Marvel announces royalties. It is a giant 2-page dissertation of the news that Marvel is sharing about how they are going to make their freelancers so much richer. In 1980, 2 years prior, he did an interview with the Comics Journal that if I get a chance, I'll read from. But when pressed, because the interviewer in 1980 was pressing Jim Shooter, come on, how much money does a Marvel artist make? How much money? And because the guy who was running the Comics Journal, he's a man named Gary Groth, in the interview had Jim really pushed back hard on the idea that Gary Groth was putting out there that syndicated newspaper strip artists could make more than working for Marvel Comics. And he said, I reject that completely. And he said, and I'll tell you why. Joe Kubert of the Kubert School, Joe Kubert, legendary illustrator, like Mount Rushmore level talent, who is the father of Andy and Adam Kubert and the godfather, the creator of the Kubert School. He is part of the National Cartoonist Syndicate, and he tells Jim, I'm a part of both. I'm a comic book guy. I'm a cartoonist guy. Cartoonists don't make anywhere near. And when pressed, Jim says, and this is 2 years prior to this, he says, so in 1980, he says, our average cartoon penciler inkers, artists for Marvel Comics, make $40,000 a year, which is a lot of money. He's like, I want to push back these guys, and he does say that they have to pencil a monthly book in order to maintain that, and some of them do too, which means they make more. But royalties is what changed the game. Royalties is what changed the game. And right here it says, less than a month after DC announced a royalty program, a royalty payment plan, Marvel Vice President of Publishing, Mike Hobson, and Jim Shooter have announced Marvel's initial plan. One that resembles DC Comics. It says here in this Comics Journal, it says that beginning in January, according to this letter on December 22nd, Marvel editor-in-chief Jim Shooter explained it will cover all of Marvel's titles except for the Dennis Menace title that they license. He says, and it will cover some of the black and white magazines that they are involved with, Epic, Illustrated, and Crazy. It says, comparing the plans between Marvel and DC. These are small but significant differences between Marvel and DC's royalties that work to the advantage or disadvantage of various members of the creative community. Marvel's plan favors the penciler working from a Marvel-style script, although only 0.1%. The breakdown artist working from a Marvel-style script by 0.5%, and the inker by 0.4%. This is how it's better than the DC plan. Marvel's is. DC's plan favors the writer working in a Marvel style by 0.5%. Jim Shooter reveals that this is a 4-year-old plan, and what I think is fascinating is when asked what he thought the results of this new plan would be, Jim Shooter jokingly quoted his editor, Tom DeFalco at the time, who would succeed Jim in 1987 as the new editor-in-chief. And I love Tom DeFalco as well, and we need to do a show about him. Jim Shooter says, and again, I'm reading directly, Tom DeFalco said, we're going to need a bigger cookie jar for all the kickbacks from our writer and artists. The thrust of this joke was echoed by DC writer Roy Thomas, who laughingly related that Dick Giordano, who was an executive at DC Comics, told him he had to spend the last several weeks explaining virtually everybody why they can't have George Perez draw everything. George was ridiculously popular at the time. In effect, the rule suddenly makes it much more desirable to work on popular titles than not. In the past, if an artist had a choice between doing an issue of the X-Men or the Dazzler, the financial remunerations would be the same. However, that decision, which will rest with the editor, can now mean a difference of thousands of dollars for the same amount of creative work. This means the editors of the popular titles will suddenly be feeling much greater pressure from creators eager to get the extra money working on a top-selling brand or a top-selling book. What I'm going to get to here is Jim Shooter being very honest that he saw the competitions coming from the independent companies like Eclipse Comics and Fantagraphics. And but first Jim Shooter talked about the possibility of infighting. He says if a writer is paired with an artist, if a writer is paired with as artist unpopular enough to mean a difference of 20,000 sales, that yearly income will drop by close to $3,000. Similar, if a penciler feels his work is being hurt by a mediocre or unpopular inker, he will consider that inker to be directly affecting his income. In effect, the creative teams are now financially dependent on one another. This is a performance thing. Look, everybody just like George Perez couldn't draw everything, that joke that the DC executive made about George Perez and his popularity at DC Comics, Terry Austin and Klaus Janson couldn't ink everything. And so, trust me, I've been there. The reason Todd McFarlane started inking himself, the reason I started inking myself, the reason Eric Larson started inking ourselves is because we felt we could sell more if you saw really what we wanted on the page. And by inking ourselves, because there was only one Scott Williams to go around, by inking ourselves, we took on a greater burden, but we also made more money. There's a flip side to this problem, though, according to Jim Shooter. Some teams are becoming closer knit as they realize the advantage of adhering to a title and working together. For instance, Jim Shooter cited Walter Simonson and Tom Palmer, who have been planning on leaving Star Wars, coming to his office and telling him that they would stick with the title. Another worry, expressed more on the creative level than on the managerial and commercial level, is that this plan might cause creators to deliberately slant their material commercially. We now have an incentive to do things for money. The incentive program is likely one hand to inspire greater work, but it can also inspire one to simply become an inspired hack trying to figure out what will sell the very, very best and maximize it. It goes on and goes over the actual incentive plan right here on this chart, and I'm not going to read that chart to you. At the press conference, Jim Shooter said he did not think DC realized that Marvel was capable of following their plan so closely because of the higher numbers involved. It will cost us a lot of money, Jim Shooter. he emphasized. Prior to his royalties plan, there had been a narrow gap between Marvel's sales and DC sales. Now, however, they are wider apart than they have ever been. It's just the passage of time. Marvel was pulling away. It ends in this concludes by saying precedence. Although the royalties plan is radically new for four-color comic books, it is not entirely new to the American comic books sector. Not only had Marvel worked into its Marvel albums contract royalty payment rates, but many alternative comics publishers already use royalty payment plans. Dave Scroggie, the editor of Pacific Comics, pointed out that their comics have included a royalty from the very beginning. Also in Eclipse. Jim Shooter said we had to go to this royalty plan to stay competitive with the new companies that were coming up. So right here, the implementation with Jim Shooter, who had worked hand in hand with again one of the early names with Michael Hobson, with Vice President Michael Hobson. For me, that's the biggie. That is this very delicate Daredevil focused comics journal is you're going to watch me if you're watching on YouTube and you can hear this on the podcast. I am putting my original 1982 back in with its tapes. Okay, we've already abused it the most. One of the best interviews I ever read to you guys. I mean, I store them together in my comics journal section, but I just thought I'd have that. This is a gem. If you can get your hands on this comics journal number 57. It'll change your life. This is 1980. This is the 1980 summer special. It's got the X-Men by John Byrne, Terry Austin. Explosive. It doesn't even begin to describe the stuff that John Byrne covers in there. Jim Shooter instigating, along with Mike Hobson, the royalty plan changed everybody at the time, and it changed everybody that came after. Dave Cockrum, who was not able to make a living doing the X-Men when he left and John Byrne replaced him, was because he wasn't fast enough to hit the monthly deadline, so they kept it at a bi-monthly rate. And the page rates that he was making, even when he inked his own work, as he did on Giant Size X-Men #1, a seminal, giant, most significant comic of the Bronze Age, and X-Men 100, my personal favorite issue that Dave did. Dave was like, I couldn't make money. I couldn't sustain my life, the paying the bills and the lifestyle that he and his wife wanted to lead. And she also worked in comic books. From these page rates, he said when he came back, which he comes back in 81 and 80 and stays through 83, Dave says, I was making so much in royalties. Dave, when he left X-Men, became the cover editor, a staff job, which paid him a great salary. But now as a freelancer, and in talking to Dave, because I have licensed his characters from him once while he was alive, and once again in his about 10 years ago from his wife and their estate. And so I have enjoyed my talks with the Cockrums over the many decades. But Dave Cockrum was like, I made so much money that second run because X-Men was the best-selling book, and it was until Frank Miller transformed Daredevil. Another case of a book that was bi-monthly. I've talked about this on the podcast, but here on this YouTube show, I can tell you, so all of these X-Men books right here, all of these X-Men books, Jim Shooter era, the pretty much everybody's favorite comic of my lifetime. And when I say this, you guys, when I go to San Diego in a few weeks, and I've got a bunch of lunches and a bunch of dinners because it's a great time, and everybody who gets together, and everybody has their own tribes, and all of the tribes will get together and they'll break bread and they'll have a great time talking about their favorite comic book experiences, maybe some art they bought, some sketches, some vintage books, some slab books. Maybe they're going to get some books to get graded from their childhood. This is the kind of stuff we talk about. And I'm talking presidents of major motion picture studios, major television networks, major producers. These are the people that have entered my sphere over the last 20, 25 years. And the passion that we share is on my spinner racks, okay? This is the passion that we share. Now, if I turn it this way, I'm going to get these Daredevils. I'm sorry, that's the Hulk. I love the Hulk. I love that. That's such a great era of the Hulk. All Jim Shooter Daredevils right here. These are all Jim Shooter. Now, Jim Shooter unlocks Frank Miller, who was working with a writer who was a really good writer. His name was Roger McKenzie. The book was bi-monthly. I want our audience to understand. That meant Daredevil came out 6 times a year, every other month. It came out in March, it came out in May, it came out in July, it came out in September, every other month, just like the X-Men before John Byrne came on. When the company decides to drop the book to bi-monthly, it's because they want to keep the title around and they want to sustain it. They don't want to cancel it. And so now they're spending less money on it because they've removed 6 basically episodes in production. But those 6 issues that do come out really have to do well. Frank Miller's brand new. He's a kid. He hooks up with a really great established writer. They do a few issues together. People like me are now buying. We're not missing our gaps. We're buying every issue because this Frank Miller guy is very exciting. Lo and behold, a few issues in, you open up the book because we didn't get catalogs. There were no previews. There was no internet. There was no way to know what was coming. There wasn't a full page ad. Frank Miller is coming because, quite frankly, he was a young kid and wasn't a proven talent yet. But Jim Shooter saw something in him. Frank Miller talks about Frank Miller directed a movie. It's called The Spirit. It's a little polarizing. I want to say that came out 15, 16 years ago, but on the commentary track, the extra features on The Spirit, Frank Miller, who's being interviewed, directly credits Jim Shooter with just, letting him run free, letting him do his thing. He starts writing and drawing Daredevil. His very first issue, he introduces us to Elektra, this brand new character that he has created. And before you know it, it is the buzziest book on planet Earth. Daredevil is the buzziest book. Frank, turns out, is as good of a writer as he was as an artist, and he had been electrifying us just from the artistic end, but his storytelling skills, his knack for character, for plot development, for cliffhangers, for action, the action was ramped way up. Well, sales start ticking up, and guess what? Daredevil is pulled off the bi-monthly schedule. It is put on a full monthly schedule, and it goes on to be Marvel's #1 book. Is that like, whoa? So Dave Cockrum, while he was on X-Men, was the #1, but I just saw F1 the other night with Brad Pitt, and they show, like, in the racing, the pole positions, and just like when you play a video game or if you're an actual F1 racer, but they're like from P15 to P14 to P4, he's pulling into P3, he could be on the stand. That's what Frank Miller did. He came from all the way back on Daredevil, 6 times a year, low priority book for Marvel, becomes their top seller, tops the charts. George Perez, who I mention here often, when I was hanging out with him, talking with him, chauffeuring him as a kid around conventions, going and making Xeroxes for him, he'd be like, well, Titans was #1 until Frank Miller. Titans was the #1 book in the entire comics industry. It had outsold Dave Cockrum's X-Men. It was cooking like lava hot. But even George was like, and then Frank Miller had to come along and outsell all of us. Frank Miller was unlocked by Jim Shooter, who empowered a 19, 20-year-old kid, said, go ahead, write this book. Yes, it was a book that was on shaky ground, but still, he removed a very popular writer, put Frank fully in charge, and the rest is history. A run that to this day is unmatched. I have seen people try to, in some ways, imitate and or emulate what Frank did. It can't be done. He came back and wrote it while David Mazzucchelli illustrated it. And again, it's just both of Frank's runs are like, they're like immortalized. And if you were a kid at that time, and I'm going to go back to the Gen Xers, my fellow Gen X crew, and some of the boomers, it's one of their favorite comic books of all time. It holds a seat that will not easily be and has not yet been knocked off. I mean, he is king of the mountain. He is king of that mountain. Daredevil and Batman, Frank's your guy. Walt Simonson, you heard Jim talk about it. 1982, he was doing Star Wars. Thor was in such a rut. It was like in this multi-year fill-in mode. There was never a same creative team. Roy Thomas and Keith Pollard had been on the book in the late 70s, early 80s. and they had done this incredible, I'll call it a saga, and it combined the Eternals, brought them into Thor's story, and kind of a multi god pantheon storyline. But once it was over, once it was completed, Thor went kind of into a serious down cycle. And I had bought Thor religiously since I was a kid. He was one of my favorite Marvel characters, but I was passing up issues and months worth of Thor comics. Walt Simonson had done the Aliens adaptation, a Star Wars work. He'd done Battlestar Galactica. Okay. He was their dedicated kind of sci fi guy. Suddenly they announce he's coming on Thor. Guess what, people? He pulls a Frank Miller in his first issue of Thor. He pulls the carpet out from all of us, pulls the rug, and I remember, whoa, what the? It, completely, someone else possessed the hammer of Thor, an alien, in fact. Beta Ray Bill was born. They both introduced brand new characters with their first outings as writer and artist to get that going. Thor goes on a 4-year bender of being one of Marvel's best books ever, written, illustrated, sometimes penciled and inked by Walt Simonson, but he was always penciling and writing, but his inks were juicy. When he didn't, guys like Terry Austin, the best inker in the business, Bob Wyacek, one of the top 5 guys, were stepping in. Thor becomes must-see comic books. Now, I'm not going to be able to go through all of these, but Jim is very aggressive, Jim Shooter, in getting licenses during this time. The Micronauts, ROM, Transformers, G.I. Joe, the movie licenses, the Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones comic. Marvel is just becomes a licensing outlet, and they all become hit books. But none was more unexpected than ROM. Look at this juicy Michael Golden cover. I'm holding up the cover to ROM number 10, and this is a comic book that I never missed. ROM by Bill Mantlo, Sal Buscema, engaged by Jim Shooter. Jim Shooter had the cover to number 1 redrawn by Mike Nasser, now named Netzer, by the time called Nasser, and pivoted, immediately hired Frank Miller and Joseph Rubinstein to do the cover to number 1. Frank did the cover to number 2 as well, or number 3. Just ROM was off to the races, but Jim was extremely invested in bringing these toys to life and giving them the best possible comic book experience that he could, which created a dedicated fandom and people like me. Now, while Jim Shooter is editor-in-chief, one of the greatest runs, I've talked about it. It's like a legend. I did an entire episode on John Byrne's Captain America. I pulled these out. These are my reader copies. Now, John and Roger Stern will say that Jim Shooter chased him off because he had a mandate. He will dispute that. Whatever the case, this is a legendary 10-issue run that is among the best that Captain America ever had, the best Captain America ever was. But following this seminal during Jim Shooter's run, this Captain America, oh man, these smell fantastic. I'm telling you guys, all I had to do was go outside. All of my Jim Shooter era books, my Bronze Age stuff is easily accessible. Boom, right there. I grab it. I was able to pull it in to pull this episode off. Okay, in the shortest order, under the weirdest, most tragic circumstances. What followed John Byrne and Roger Stern was a J.M. DeMatteis and Mike Zeck run that is another one that's for the ages. It's right, like, again, speaking of pace cars, it's right on the it's ready to draft off of Byrne. It's ready to draft. The thing about Byrne is it's just 10 issues. It's so good. But Captain America had nothing but banger, awesome creative teams while Jim was around. Jim settled, like, he had to be King Solomon often. And he had to settle creative disputes. I've talked about it here. It's on these X-Men issues. It's on these very X-Men issues where Chris and John Byrne are starting to fall apart, okay? And just like the two women who say that's my baby in King Solomon's, he had to make a choice. And it was such a big deal that it became a headline. I took a picture of it so I wouldn't have to go through the entire rigmarole of pulling this up. But check this out. Right here, look at this. 1980 Comics Journal. John Byrne leaves X-Men for Fantastic Four. This is a big deal. This is the biggest star in comics leaving the vehicle that we fell in love with him. And because he wants to write, he feels like he is doing a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of the writing on X-Men. Chris Claremont's trying to hold position, hold court. And what Jim Shooter is, how about we pivot you to Captain America, and how about we give you Fantastic Four that you can write and draw completely all your own? John Byrne says yes, and who is rewarded? We are. I got my buddies out there who have copious amounts of these outstanding issues. We got a 5-year extended run, some of the best. It's the second best run. It's right up there. Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, 101 issues. The 5-year John Byrne run. You know, the other day somebody on X said, "What's your favorite Fantastic Four run not done by John Byrne or Jack Kirby?" Okay, that's how completely overwhelming John's Fantastic Four run was to our generation. And who guided him there? Jim Shooter. Who gave him the green light? Jim Shooter. So we got Frank Miller's Daredevil. We got Walt Simonson's Thor. We got the Captain America stuff. We got this incredible. I just grabbed two. These are two of the very best. John Byrne was given the helm of the Fantastic Four and was just pushed the envelope and created some of the best stories and the best art. You know, people wanted John Byrne. DC was calling. They wanted him. Jim Shooter locked him down. Some of the issues that I held up were the Galactus Terrax issues, where the Avengers came with the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man and Daredevil sit on a ledge because they can't contribute to this Galactus battle. It's one of the best parts of it. It's like, we have to watch. We can't affect this at all. While Iron Man and Thor and the Fantastic Four are slugging it out with their extensive powers. Doctor Strange even shows up. I'm holding up these incredible Walt Simonson Thors. Okay, 350. 358, 340, 341. This is the stuff of absolute legend. The best Thor's ever been. Again, I put this right on the heels, if not slightly pole position, of the actual Kirby run. Incredibly influenced by Jack, but Walt just went on a tear. This is the best Thor. Thor hasn't been this good since. Don't try and offer up. I don't want to hear it. The extended, you got things that happen with Shooter. Quality control. Extended quality control. Long 4-year, 5-year runs under Shooter. They were comfortable. They were making great royalties. They were provided for. They just completely were locked in to these extended assignments in a way that we don't see anymore. We do not see this anymore. Here's the big baller. This is Jim Shooter era. This right here. What I'm about to show you. Oh yeah, there it is. The miniseries was born under Jim Shooter. The miniseries, the advent of the miniseries, the Contest of Champions, Wolverine, Vision, Scarlet Witch, the Falcon. The miniseries format was pioneered and championed. I told you, Jim had great instincts. He worked with great people. He gave the green lights to the great stuff. Wolverine had become so popular, they gave him his own series. It's Chris Claremont. It's Frank Miller. You got the two biggest talents, the guy who's writing X-Men and the guy who's writing and drawing Wolverine. This is a part of the Jim Shooter tenure, the Jim Shooter brilliance. I mean, you guys, it is literally just absolutely overwhelming. It is overwhelming. Let me see if I'm going to follow my instincts right on this. I believe, if not this one, there it is. Went to San Diego. This is back when we signed him on the inside. I can't get the CG seed, but I can show it to you. Chris Claremont, Frank Miller, okay? Signing my Wolverine #1, okay? Back, no one signed on the cover. I remember the first time somebody asked me to sign on the cover. I'm like, I'm defacing your comic. Those days are way behind us, okay? Those days are gone. Stood in line, San Diego Comic-Con, Chris Claremont, Frank Miller, baller. Okay. So as you can see, it's a nonstop highlight reel. That is, so we've covered the royalty plan, the management, the unlocking of the talent, the empowerment of talent. Going, I believe in you, kid. You can write. We heard in the '90s how threatened that Todd and myself and Eric and Jim were making the writers because we were starting to write our own work because there had been a giant chasm. The only guys who had done that was them. But the new guys breaking in, they were all more content. I'll just draw your story. Just draw your story. We were like, no, we want to be like the guys that Shooter unlocked because we saw what they had in them and we wanted to emulate that. Before I get, no, I'll do this. I'll do that later. The last aspect of Jim's greatness, he looked out for talent in the financial sector, and in just in an incredible way. Todd McFarlane doesn't make whatever $1 million off Spider-Man #1. I don't make $1 million off X-Force #1. Jim doesn't make $1 million off X-Men without that royalty component. What do? Do we go buy yachts? And no, back in the '90s, we didn't buy boats. We didn't buy yachts. We reinvested it into our businesses. Those were Jim said it the best. Jim Lee said, these are our war chests. You don't get to those war chests without a percentage of sales. Without a percentage of 5 million, a percentage of 3 million, a percentage of 8 million, you're not able to get that surge. And from talking to Chris Claremont, from talking to Dave Cockrum in the 80s, and from Paul Smith, who I did an entire episode on, and he said he's leaving after a year because he had banked so much money on the X-Men. Imagine in 1983, let's say he made $250,000. Let's say he made $250,000 in 1983. In today's market, that's probably $1 million. Okay, in today's market, whatever the upshoot, it's a giant amount of money. This is a guy who was riding around on his motorcycle, and he's like, I'm just going to drive. I'm going to get on my chopper. I'm going to drive across America because I love to, I'd rather be on my bike than drawing. He did 1 year. He told everybody, I'm ending after a year. We had to suffer through the consequences of him actually leaving. I did a dedicated, before we went to YouTube, I had a podcast episode that celebrates Paul Smith and all of his accomplishments. One brilliant, incredible year, but he made so much money that he left. That's because of Jim Shooter. Jim Shooter, Michael Hobson implemented the royalties in a competitive marketplace to unlock the talent, and Jim empowered and Jim unlocked. I'm going to say those over and over and over again because I've never seen anybody do it on the level that he did it. Jim Shooter, the writer, is my favorite part, and it's the part of Jim that I got the most mushy gushy with when I had my brunch with him in 1993. Jim was a good friend with Chuck Rosansky, who owned the biggest chain of comic book shops, Mile High Comics. Mile High Comics was legendary. Their ads were in all manner of comic books every month, maybe all the comics every month. I always remembered the Mile High Comics had the double page ad with yellow coloring and the pricings, and I would just sit there hunched over my bed, comic book on the ground, looking at the different prices, wishing I could have some of these Silver Age comics. Chuck Rosansky was opening a Mile High comic book store, a mega store, he called it, a superstore, and it was the biggest, most impressive in terms of square footage and just displays and raw just comic book awesomeness. And he had myself and Jim Shooter on back-to-back days to celebrate it. Well, so Jim is in town. Chuck is his very good friend. And while I have the Saturday and he has the Sunday, I'm going and having breakfast, a brunch. And Dan Fraga, I was giving a room to him at my house at the time, he hopped in and we drove over to the Anaheim near Disneyland Hotel where because the megastore was just a few lights down from Disneyland. Chuck knew what he was doing. He put some great real estate next to some really great real estate. So Jim is in Anaheim. He's staying at the Disneyland Hotel or one of the adjacent hotels. Dan and I go meet him, and we have this great time. Now, Jim is no longer with Valiant, and I had my Unity books, my Valiant books. I am not sharing those with them on the YouTube show, but Unity was a giant Jim Shooter Vision crossover around the year and a half of early Valiant, which started off with licenses of old Gold Key comics, Magnus the Robot Fighter, Solar, and it was brilliant. And it really, legitimately, organically had connected with fans. But he had a falling out with management, and they got rid of Jim. They showed him the door. It was a big, giant, upsetting event that was covered by all the different comic book press because Jim's a big deal. And nobody really believed that Valiant could succeed, but they did under Jim's direction and under his helm. He is at this time figuring out his next moves. I am talking to him about writing some stuff for me. But this brunch that we had was so much fun, and we were able to discuss so much of what I loved about Jim. And I was able to pour all my love out on the work that he did. Many of you are going to instantly identify, and we just recently did an entire episode on Secret Wars. This deserves all the praise. This is the omnibus. This is a giant triumph of really execution, in that the toys themselves didn't take. They didn't get a second, third wave. Maybe they got a second wave, but then it was gone. The Secret Wars toys were supposed to be much more ambitious. They'd landed with a bit of a middling kind of reaction. They were supposed to go up against G.I. Joe and the Star Wars kind of dominance of toys at the time. And we were all shocked. Bottom line, the toys weren't very... They're fun to have, and I enjoyed having them, but they were not as posable, and they didn't have all of the articulation that you really wanted from a toy. The comic book way, way, way outperformed the impact of the toy and made Marvel millions and millions and millions of dollars and introduced the event blockbuster. And for that, Jim also gets the accolades. This came out a year before Crisis on Infinite Earths, and Marvel just... This is when I learned Marvel just outsells DC Comics, just like 3-1, 2-1, especially during that period. I'm talking of that period. Because Crisis had a really acclaimed team of Marv Wolfman and George Perez, and was not toy-centric. Secret Wars was toy-centric. It was meant to sell action figures and playsets, and it became elevated to something much beyond that. And the great thing is Jim and Mike Zeck and John Beatty, the entire creative team behind Secret Wars, have been out on the convention circuit, have been out on the signature circuit the last 4 or 5 years, 6 years maybe before the pandemic, so let's go 7 years. And so many of you have been able to encounter and interact with them, and it is to your benefit and to theirs because they loved it. Mike Zeck is the sweetest guy. John Beatty is the sweetest guy, and you can see the sweet center that resided inside of Jim Shooter. But what I'm going to do right now, and I'm going to wax poetically about the greatest Avengers run that ever was. I got my short box right here that I'm just going to pull comic books out of, okay? And boy, did I get a doozy. This is my single favorite Avengers comic ever written, ever illustrated. This is part of the Bride of Ultron saga that Jim introduced, and one of the best aspects of this book, and I've talked about it often, is the doubt that Wonder Man shows. He has just been resurrected and brought back to life after a decade, and is aware of it in the book. And voodoo magic brought him back, and he's very, very concerned about dying again. He's as powerful and as strong as Thor. He is kind of like Superman level in terms of strength and invulnerability, but he's terrified that having died once, he could die again. And he expresses before they go into battle with Ultron in this issue, like, my teammates can probably sense how terrified I am of this, because Ultron, the issue before, wiped out Iron Man, Captain America, Scarlet Witch, Vision, just the Beast. They're all in the hospital when this book begins. Iron Man is salvaging himself. He's badly damaged, but he gets his armor repowered up. Thor arrives on scene. Black Panther heeds the call, but even says, I'm not going to be effective. I'm just the Black Panther. I don't have, and Black Panther doesn't even have like his MCU level powers that the vibranium suit gives him. So Thor, Wonder Man, Black Panther, and Iron Man have to go in and save Wasp, who's having her entire consciousness put into Jocasta, who is the bride of Ultron. Now, let me see if I have it over here. Do I have it? Did I put it? I thought recently I put it. See, I'm telling you, this really took. There it is. The True Believers. Whoa! I can open this one. Okay. I just look. I woke up this morning and I had to honor Jim, and I got to talk about Jim. And this is part of this 2 year incredible run that Jim Shooter, or as he was calling himself, James Shooter, James Shooter. Okay. James Shooter is straight up balling during this time. George Perez is deep in his bag, giving us some of the best visuals. This is that stuff where Simon Williams, aka Wonder Man, is doubting and is very much terrified that they're all going to learn how truly scared he is. Oh man, I just this shot of Thor with his the hilt of the hammer underneath, and he's trying to pull Ultron back, who's pounding on Wonder Man. The consciousness of Janet Van Dyne, Wasp, is being downloaded in very dramatic fashion. You know, Jim understood that we wanted really dire villains. I'd say one of the things I loved about all his work is all his villains were just the most dire. Janet's, the Wasp's consciousness is going into Jocasta. She's, if this succeeds, she'll just be a husk, and all of her brain waves and everything will be inside of Jocasta. Ultron, if you don't know who he is, he's kind of like Frankenstein's monster. Dr. Frankenstein would be Ant-Man, Yellow Jacket. Look at the power, look at the fury in this shot. As a kid on newsprint, these pages just stayed with me. Fantastic, unbelievable, epic, epic, epic comics. But you know what? And here's the deal. I can do this again every single one of these books. You think I like this? You think I like this issue? I have this. I have this. This is the nicer copy. It's in Mylar. This is Avengers 161 is what 162, 161 is what I'm sharing. Right after this storyline, he treats us to this incredible, what we call the Count Nefaria saga, okay? And he introduces a character that in a 3-part arc, I've covered it on the podcast, and it is, I told you, do I have enough of this? So just in case you're wondering if you know, if I cherish this era, as I say I do, okay? This is my favorite Avengers issue. This is my favorite period for this comic. And the writing that Jim Shooter was doing was so incredibly rich and textured and inspirational. I'm sitting here and I'm digging through because I want to show you these specific issues. I want to give these specific issues as part of my share. You guys, there's a fourth. Okay, I didn't plan this. Look. So now, just so you know, okay. When I tell you that I have a fave, that's 2, that's 3, okay, that's 4, and that's not okay. Again, what do I have in my spinner rack? I got my True Believer Reader Edition. Okay, Avengers was outselling X-Men at this time, and when I get around the table, when I talk to my Gen X buddies, my Boomer buddies, this is the stuff that we hold so dear. Okay, here is the beginning of this epic 3-parter that George Perez would do covers, but John Byrne would do the interiors, the Count Nefaria saga. Now, here's the deal. This book originally, 7-Eleven, given to my friend Nathan Doney, whose mom would then throw it away. My earliest opportunity in 1980 with comic book stores, I was able to rebuy, and obviously the idea that I lost this book along with about 40 comics that I gave my friend, and then his mom threw them away, was the first kind of, I can't feel my body, I can't feel my, it was probably the raging hate that I had, that I wanted to with my eyes and mouth and breathe fire, and I was just so mad at Nathan's mom. that she took it upon herself. She said, "You shouldn't be reading those comics, Robbie." I threw them in the trash. When? A week ago. What? And Nathan's sitting back there going, "Sorry, dude, I wish I could tell you." That's a 7-Eleven purchase. Now, this is a different 7-Eleven on Brookhurst, okay, that I bought this. My mom went into the grocery store. I sat in the car. I read this back, front, consumed it. This is from a place called Foodland. Foodland, the grocery store up the street from my house, had one of the best spinner racks when we moved from our Magnolia Broadway residence and we moved deeper into Ball Road, our Ball Road, when we lived off a street called Trident. These are now the dominion of Foodland. Foodland is now my dealer, and I am grabbing these, and I just remember so just vividly just being so ridiculously moved by these comics. This I've talked about often. These two issues, I am going. I'm riding my bike to get my McDonald's meal. McDonald had introduced breakfast, and little Robbie Liefeld loved his hash browns, loved his egg McMuffin, and the 7-Eleven that was positioned near the 7-Eleven that was positioned right next to the McDonald's. I'd buy the comics. I'd then take them over to McDonald's. So I'd get the comic at 7-Eleven. I'd walk literally on the same property, park my bike, walk over, order my McDonald's breakfast, and with greasy fingers, turn these pages. Okay, turn these pages and consume this book and just be in awe. This is when the Korvac saga begins. One of these upcoming shows, I'll show you. I have some pages from this book because one of the things I realized is so much of the original art that I own is from this. It's pretty much all Jim Shooter centric. It's pretty much all. Ultron comes back. Jocasta is unleashed again. A sequel by Jim Shooter is rendered. George Perez is back. This is U-Totem. This is 7-Eleven. I walked the 5 blocks. There's U-Totem was like Stop and Go, both of which were a knockoff of the 7-Eleven model. U-Totem, okay? There was a bunch of them in Southern California. I grabbed this. Again, you didn't know it was coming. You just turned the corner. You saw the comics. Whoa! I was walking home the 5 blocks. I plopped down in real time on the curb and just read it. Like, I can't wait to get home. I had to consume this right now. These are all within the context of, as I said, the Korvac saga. The Korvac saga that was being unleashed by Jim, which was this long-standing, multi-issue, year-long story about a cosmic god who was hiding here on Earth. I can't possibly, again, show you all these. Another standout, Grim Reaper. That's a 7-Eleven purchase. Another 7-Eleven purchase. All of these, you guys, when you have that experience and you're like, 7-Eleven was a major distributor, and there were about 4 of them. Once I moved and lived off Ball Road, Trident, 905 South Trident. Once I moved there was now access to several other 7-Elevens. I'd left behind the 4 corners of Magnolia and Broadway and the liquor store and the 7-Eleven and the Pizza Hut and the Stater Brothers. And now, again, I had Foodland, I had U-Totem, and I had access to greater amounts of 7-Elevens. And now I'm not 8 and I'm not 7 anymore. Ooh, I'm big time. I'm 11. I'm 12 when this stuff is coming out. And the people who love this will tell you, and they are not wrong, that these are some of the most entertaining comics of their youth. And Jim Shooter's Korvac saga. This is a Foodland afternoon, going inside, look at that cover. This is one of those covers that I would go crazy to have. I would bid this. I would absolutely bid on this and try and obtain this particular cover. What was happening in the Korvac saga was that different characters were disappearing, and that was a mystery within a mystery. There are several mysteries within the mysteries until we unlock the ultimate mystery box, which is Korvac, and it was all by design, and it was some of the most kind of well thought out, extended, action packed storytelling that I have ever experienced on the Avengers title. George Perez did a bunch of the heavy lifting. Dave Wenzel, Sal Buscema had come in during that time. I just didn't care. The stories were so good that as much as I preferred it as George, Sal with Klaus Janson, David Wenzel with Ricardo Velamonte, the artwork was good enough because I just had to finish these stories. Ultron, Bride of Ultron happens in the context of this. Like I said, the Collector happens in the context of this. There's all manner of different villains popping up during this Korvac, which starts as a subplot and then takes over the book and becomes the major plot. His run on Avengers is my favorite run on the history. I've read the entire from issue 1 of Avengers all the way through, the 80s, when I wasn't as impressed with the book anymore because it didn't hold a candle to this. I've often said that what happened with the Avengers line of books, and we're so lucky that John Byrne was nestled away on Fantastic Four and Walt was nestled away on Thor. All of the great talent that got into the business post the royalty activity of 1982, and this is kind of the, half full, half empty model. Jim Shooter did create a sequence where everybody who was really good, new talent, Paul Smith, Art Adams, Rick Leonardi, they jumped to the X-Men. The George Perez, when George Perez leaves the Avengers with issue 201, 202, it's the last time the Avengers has a marquee name for almost a decade, maybe longer. Because all the marquee names wanted to go work on X-Men books, get X-Men royalties, get houses in Malibu like Mark Silvestri, drive Porsches, sports cars. That's the kind of money that royalties gave you. So going all the way back, these are the significant decisions that impacted us as businessmen. These stories rang the bell and created a stir of emotion and excitement. And Iron Man and Thor and Wonder Man and Vision and Scarlet Witch were never as exciting under the pen of Jim Shooter. This was an incredible run. I would read everything that Jim did. I read Secret Wars. I read all the different, he did some novellas with the Avengers when they had their pocketbook license. There's only so much stuff that I can throw and only so much stuff that I can fit in. But whether it's the Wolverine, Chris Claremont Wolverine, the Frank Miller, Chris Claremont Wolverine, the John Byrne Captain America, the John Byrne Fantastic Four, the launch of Alpha Flight, which gave John Byrne his biggest hit and was Marvel's #1 book for a period. These are all a product of Jim Shooter's creative vision. He was a visionary for Marvel Comics, the likes of which they have never seen since. If I'm ranking, it's Jim. Since Jim, it's Tom DeFalco, it's C.B. Cebulski, it's Axel Alonso, it's Joe Quesada. That is how I would rank these guys. But the distance between Jim and Tom is like this, then from Tom to CB, then from CB to Axel, from Axel to Joe. Too many incredible legendary works were unlocked and unleashed during Jim Shooter's reign. People would challenge him. He was the rock that others broke themselves against. He talks in his Comics Journal interviews how he and Roy Thomas, they had a difference of opinion. Roy Thomas gave him an ultimatum. Jim says, if you're going to give me an ultimatum, I'm going to tell you no. When I tell you no, it's over. Marv Wolfman was upset that Jim did away with the writer-editor component that he and many others had enjoyed prior to him being editor-in-chief. He didn't want people to write and edit their own books. He had his reasons for that. It set some people off. Marv Wolfman was one of them. Some of the friction between Jim and other artists and writers created the boon, the resurgence at DC Comics, where we got the new Teen Titans. We got Len Wein on Green Lantern. We got a resurgence of Swamp Thing from Len Wein with Tom Yates. We got Roy Thomas going over there and doing All-Star Squadron. Infinity Inc. Look, it was great creative friction. It was great, exciting, competitiveness. That's the word I'm looking for. Competitiveness. Jim was above all else a competitor. And I did an episode where people weigh in on him after Secret Wars and how he changed. And I can't imagine. By that time, the guy's been in this 7-8 years. He's the wonderkin that gave us your Superboy and your Legion of Superhero comics that were beloved by myself and so many others. I tell you guys, I'm part of all these different groups. I'm part of several Legion of Superheroes groups. Everybody holds this stuff in a very special regard. Jim Shooter's Legion. Then there's the Bronze Age Marvel people, the Gen X guys who are my age, the boomers who are a little older. This is the best Avengers ever was, ever will be. Is it helped by John Byrne and George Perez jumping in and doing so many incredible storylines? That Count Nefaria storyline, I'm kind of underselling it. It's basically takes a character that was a scientist, a rich benefactor who had been around in Marvel Comics for a while, and his motivations become invested in transforming himself into a Superman style character, and he does become a Superman style character, and you get 3 issues of what would it look like if the Avengers battled Superman. It is very much, Nefaria is closer in tone to Omni-Man than he is to Superman, and it is a gripping 3 issues. Jim did not lack for leadership, for business acumen, and he certainly didn't lack for talent, and we were all the better for it. And on this day, I just want to say, Jim, it was so much fun talking about your Avengers run, entertaining the opportunity to work together. And I'm going to tell you the funniest thing, because it was something we all wondered. Even today, a talent said, Jim didn't like me. He was a grid guy. He certainly did move into a grid era. At Valiant, it was very grid, and grid means 6 panels a page equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The grid was something that me and my Image peers didn't really ascribe to. We wanted to do our own thing, be bigger, be splashy. Dan Fraga and I were sitting with Jim as he was eating his toast, and I said, Jim, what is it? Why are you with? And he did have some young names, like David Lapham was one of his youngest guys. I visited the Valiant headquarters not too long after that. They had little kids drawing desks, the kind that you and I sat at, well, if you're my age, in 4th and 5th and 6th grade, that you put your folder in or you lifted your lid. Their bullpen was all those type of desks in like a weird office building. It was very, very claustrophobic. Jim was no longer there. Jim said, Rob, none of my artists can compete with the flash and the style and the dynamics that you and your peers, you and Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane and Mark Silvestri bring. You guys are veterans. You've been doing this for almost a decade. You've refined your styles. Very casually, very unemotionally, he said to me, Rob, I got a lot of young artists, and they don't draw very pretty. In fact, some of the stuff is a little ugly. So I have a choice. Do I want big, ugly pictures, or do I want small, ugly pictures as they learn their craft? Rob, we're doing small, ugly. Okay. Does that make sense? I think Dan and I was like, the light bulb, bing! It was a preventative measure while they grew into who they were supposed to be. And you can see later on, years later, with David Lapham and his Stray Bullets, he had become that guy that he wasn't right at the beginning. I'd rather have small, ugly drawings than big ones at this point, because he was tasked with, on a budget, breaking all this young talent in, because Valiant wasn't getting the big names. They weren't signing the big, sexy names. Those people were either at Marvel or DC, or they were migrating over with us at Image Comics. Jim was very, very, very bright. One of the brightest guys I've ever discussed in comics. There's guys I've known in comics, and recently I've told my friends, there's at least one guy who I believe, in the times that I've spoken to him over 40 years, he is the dumbest person I have ever met in comic books. Comic books has a couple of real dim bulbs. They couldn't light up a flashlight, much less a city, okay? That's not Jim Shooter. Jim could light it up. When asked how he was able to find that early Valiant success, it was in the Comic Books Buyer's Guide. When they interviewed, they said, look, you've taken this young talent, you've taken these characters that a generation doesn't know, they're kind of dusty, with Magnus the Robot Fighter, with Solar Man of the Atom, and you've made this comic company so hot. Jim said, I can conduct the orchestra. That is my job. That's what I did at Marvel. That's what I've done here. I can conduct the orchestra. Jim was, in fact, the best conductor. He was a visionary. We were all better for him. Modern Marvel, the sales went up. You don't unlock Frank Miller and John Byrne and Walt Simonson and Bill Sienkiewicz and a bunch of other names I didn't mention, Paul Smith. You don't unlock those guys and not then reap the benefits and watch your sales go up and watch you put greater distance between yourself and DC Comics. In that royalty report, it said when they were both coming up with their plans, they were closer in sales. Marvel had already pulled away. Marvel was already becoming popular. The 80s was extremely successful for Marvel Comics. A mid-range Marvel comic was outselling a top-selling DC comic. Crazy times. The modern comic book world that we live in is a result of the moves that Jim Shooter made as a businessman, as a leader, as a visionary, and as a talent. And Jim, we thank you. I thank you for hours of childhood, those incredible encounters at the grocery store, at the newsstand, the 7-Eleven, the U-Totem. You took my imagination to all new places. You showed me what was possible, and you made me want to make those very same comics. So, sir, to you, I say thank you. Rest in peace, rest in power, and we are grateful that you gave all you gave to comic books. In reading other people's recollections and some of the things that have been said about Jim, they're not all positive. He rubbed some people the wrong way. But as I said, on camera, on his documentary, Frank Miller was very effusive in his praise for Jim and the opportunities that he gave him. This morning I read Walter Simonson, who leaned in on the great aspects of Jim and all of the positives, and that they got along great and had a good relationship and didn't choose to try and tear him down with some conflict that they had or some hurt feelings that they've been carrying for 4 decades. It doesn't matter. What he gave to the business was bigger than your personal beef with him. And I'll just end it at that. Thank you for this very special, for viewing this very special tribute issue. Again, it's like a garage level show. I wanted to show you an issue that Jim had penciled of Marvel. He penciled a chapter because Jim was an artist as well, and I don't want that to go unnoticed and unsaid. I'm not sure that I have it with me, and it would probably require a little more digging than I was prepared to do before the show. Are you kidding me? It's not it. Shoot, I thought I had it. Jim penciled one chapter. I did a podcast on it of the supervillain team up crossed over, which is a book that featured Doctor Doom and Submariner crossed over with Avengers, and the connective chapter. It's got a great Gil Kane cover of Iron Man and Daredevil blasting. Supervillain team up wasn't a long standing issue. Maybe it was issue 7, maybe it was issue 11. I don't know what it was, but Doctor Doom, Iron Man facing off. Jim Shooter actually drew that issue. He illustrated it. In one of the comic journal interviews, he talked of that he liked to draw comics. He just couldn't do it very fast. He talked about how John Buscema and Gene Colan and some of these others, it was just, he said they could finish a page as they sneezed. And I understood what he was saying. But Jim was multifaceted, multi-talented, and I'll pop that issue on when I grab it for a future episode and reference it. But super ultra talented, and just appreciate you guys hanging with me, sharing memories about Jim Shooter, listening to really, when you're able to talk about him, bring up that royalties exist because of him. I get paid on cable and Deadpool participation because of Jim Shooter, the stuff that Jim Shooter put forth. Life-changing, life-altering, changed my station in life, changed my outlook in comics. And just wanted to kind of shine the light on his achievements, his talent, and wanted to share that with you guys. I'm going to continue to share over on my social medias. If you guys, when I'm not on the show, you can follow me. I'm over on X at Robert Liefeld, RobertLiefeld, at Robert Liefeld. That is my handle. It's got a blue check. It says I'm really me. That is the genuine article. that you're speaking to. I read your replies, your mentions, all of your interactions. Thank you so much for interacting with me on the platform formerly known as Twitter. We still call them tweets. I will say that each and every time. It confuses me. X. On X, I am at Robert Liefeld. Over on Instagram, I am at Rob Liefeld. Much easier. ROBLIEFELD. Another blue check. I'm the legit article. I'm the genuine dude you're talking to. That's me. I don't have anybody else running my accounts. So when we interact, whether I'm reading or responding to your replies, your mentions, your comments, that is actually me. Thank you for interacting with me, for following me, for looking at my stuff. Instagram is the more visual component. It's my favorite of all the social medias. I like to share art and pictures of the people I love, who I'm hanging out with, the stuff we're doing, the art that I'm making. So very much appreciate that you guys follow me over on Instagram, at Rob Liefeld on Instagram, at Robert Liefeld on X. We have a group called Rob Liefeld Marvel Extreme and Beyond over on Facebook. It's a Facebook group. So look for Rob Liefeld, Marvel Extreme and Beyond, myself, or Terry Sala, S-A-L-A. We are the two administrators of the group. We will be the ones that click you on through. We have kick-ass art contests, so much talent in that group. We are constantly talking about comic books. Each and every episode of the Rob Liefeld Show and Robservations gets a dedicated post to dissect, to parse, to discuss, and we would just love to see you over there. Rob Liefeld, Marvel Extreme and Beyond is the name of the group. All you got to do is hit the join, and we'll click you in on the other side, and we would love to see you there. We would love to talk to you there. I check in multiple times a day on all of these, whether it's at Robert Liefeld on X, Rob Liefeld on Instagram, or Rob Liefeld Marvel Extreme and Beyond on Facebook. I am in these groups talking to you guys, hanging out with you guys each and every day, because come on, we are each other's people. That's what we do. I'll be live streaming again real soon on the Whatnot platform, on eBay Live. Follow me on both, and you'll get notifications for all of our exclusive comics. We got a lot of exclusive material, comic books. Like, for instance, this right here. My book, it's called Last Blood. It's the Twilight of the Extreme Universe. Yes, that is Battlestone right there. This is the manga edition. This is the kind of stuff that you can only get if you are online, and these are direct. This is my oh, look at these profit pages that I illustrated. This is the kind of stuff that you get direct to consumer, is what I'm all about on all of these live streams. I've got Youngblood, Last Blood. We've got Prophet Comics. We've got tons, maybe 100 exclusive between Deadpool and Captain America, maybe 100 Marvel exclusives altogether. Stuff that you can only get from me, because I'm so busy doing the comics, making the comics, I can't get to a city near you. I'm not going to be in Idaho or Montana or even Vegas this year. I'm not going to be in Chicago. I'm not going to be in Michigan. So when I can't get out there, these live streams help me get my stuff to you. We have a great rating. We have a 5-star. We're dependable. We're reliable. Follow me, Rob Liefeld on Whatnot. Find me, follow me. You'll get notified when I go live. eBay, especially for the week of San Diego, be looking out for notifications that we're going to have live shows. So we will look for you in our live streams. Each and every show, I want you to know that we're rooting for you. We are pulling for you. Life is full of burdens and obstacles, and it seems like every day there's something else that we have to clear. I could not be more excited to be going through this life with you. And I got kids, you got families, you got all manner of deadlines and pressures in your job, just like I do. And I'm feeling it just like you're feeling it. Don't let the grind get you down. Step off the hamster wheel. Step off the treadmill. Just get right, get a lunch, get a meal, interact with some great friends, pick up that phone, call your buddy, call your loved ones that you haven't connected with in the longest time, and get out, take a drive in your car. It's the summer. Go walk in the park, go to the beach, go to an amusement park, go grab a movie. Me and my family, we went and saw F1 last night. It was great. We haven't all seen a movie together in forever. My son is in from Texas. Just lit me up. I mean, I went to bed so excited. I woke up so excited. It was so fun. Grabbed Greek food before that, gyros, and just my wife and I are carrying over our taste that we accumulated from being over in Greece a couple weeks ago. But look, the bottom line is you can't let the grind get to you, and you got to be proactive and step off. Read a great comic book, a great novel, watch a great streaming show that you've been waiting to. Just anything that distracts you so you can get rebooted and recharged and get back at it, okay? We're rooting for you. Two fist, boom, into my blue Yeti microphone, wishing you all the best. Do not leave me behind. I'm still going to be here. I'll be right out there. Grab me, pick me up. We will absolutely, most definitely, drum roll please, inevitably, we're going to talk again real soon.